Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the set of Anger Management. I'm your host, Adam Sandler.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone.
No, you're supposed to say, and I'm Jack Nicholson, my friend. He's the other guy.
I know, I couldn't think of it off the top of my head. You sprung that on me.
That's okay. Good to see you, man. How are you? I'm excited to be back recording.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we had the week off, but I'm raring to go. We've got a ton to talk about. We've still got our recap of the Austrian Grand Prix and all things F1, of course. We have some League of Legends, looking at a few different matches. Justin was able to get in some games of Magic the Gathering as well, so we'll get to talk about that. But let's weave down the straights into our Rose, Thorn, and Seed and get into it.
Love that. Let's start us off, man.
So my Rose for this past week, I just last week in general went pretty smoothly. My property manager was on vacation, and my goal when people are on vacation is to like not bother them at all, and I didn't have to. Even there were some situations that came up, but I was able to handle them. My like maintenance manager told our VP that I did a good job holding down the fort, and that everything was good. And so I was glad. Like, I always think back to when I was working at my last hotel down in Maryland, and I would like just have my 2 days off a week, and I would be getting phone calls, and like just my coworkers just were constantly, they felt no like regard for like leaving me be on my days off and like figuring things out for themselves. And that like sucked. Like, I would be on the golf course getting phone calls and things like that, and I was just like, this blows. So I make a really concerted effort to like just handle things and make sure that I'm not just bugging people when they have their time off, because everyone needs that. So that was pretty good. I was happy with that for the week, being able to kind of accomplish what I was looking to do.
Yeah, and especially that's very much like treat others how you want to be treated, putting yourself in a position to be able to take care of the things that are necessary while they're gone, not have to bother them, especially in the sense of like you don't want to be bothered. I know I would hate to be bothered on my quote unquote day off. It's not really a day off then. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that things went smoothly in that regard.
Yeah, so pretty solid overall. My thorn this week is a pretty minor one. Colleen and I went to the beach with some friends on Saturday this past week, and so we were there. But twice while we were there, there was like lightning. I guess within I guess in New Jersey, it's a 30-mile radius of the beach, and if there's lightning anywhere reported, they shut down the beach for 45 minutes. So that happened a couple times. It really wasn't a huge inconvenience the first time. We just like went out to the parking lot and sat and like had our lunches. It didn't rain much at all. Then the second time was later on in the afternoon, and we're like, yeah, we're about to leave anyway, so we kind of packed up and all. But the biggest part of the inconvenience is like the undoing of your setup, because you can't leave anything on the beach, and then having to reset it up. So like our group of people, we were like taking down umbrellas, packing up our beach chairs, like putting all the towels and like whatever else away and all. And that's just a pain to then set up again 45 minutes to an hour later, and then to like have to take it down again at the end. It was just an annoyance, but again, minor. We still had a day at the beach, but it was just one of those things that it's like, I could have had a more relaxing day without that, but good day overall.
So you're saying it was just lightning? There was no like rain or thunder or anything like that?
Light rain. I mean, I assume if there's lightning, there's thunder somewhere, but
Hmm.
we really didn't hear. We heard maybe one or two little bits of thunder the second time when we were getting ready to leave anyway. But earlier
Hmm.
on, it was like sprinkle of rain for like 10 minutes that we didn't even really use umbrellas. We just kind of sat in the parking lot and just got rained on because it wasn't heavy
Sure.
enough to matter. But yeah, that time we saw dark clouds, but no lightning, no thunder. But I guess they're worried about lightning striking the water, someone getting zapped in like at the beach. And I was able to learn that none of my friends have ever licked a 9-volt battery, which was surprising to me. But
I don't think I've ever done that.
I didn't think this was that weird of a thing to do. Some kid dared me to in shop class in high school, and so I did
Sure.
it. Just like
Sure.
zaps your tongue for a second, because I was like, oh, if the lightning struck the ocean 30 miles from here, and I was in the water, like would I feel? I was like, would I feel it? Would it just be like the little zap you get from licking a 9-volt battery? And all my friends just like looked at me and they were like,
Hmm.
"What are you talking about?"
Oh wow, like they like revealed something like, oh wow, he might be stupid.
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't think that was that weird of a thing to do,
Nah.
but apparently my friends would disagree. But nonetheless, that does bring me to my seed for this week, and my seed is literally seeds. So Colleen and I over the weekend on Sunday, um, we we've been plant sitting for my friend Tyler. So not Willie, but another Tyler, and so it inspired us. Colleen's been wanting to get more plants, and I was like, okay, like this will be a nice little Sunday thing to go out. We went to Home Depot or Lowe's, one of the two. Bought a decorative plant. Then we went to a local like garden greenhouse type deal and got. We're like looking at some of their plants and ended up buying a scorpion and ghost pepper plant. So
Ooh.
with that, I decided to start trying to germinate our Carolina Reaper plant seeds to start a new Carolina Reaper plant. So we got like one of those big long like little planter things, and so we're gonna have all the peppers just next to each other
That's
growing.
super exciting.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm not very good at. I don't have a green thumb. I don't know how to take care of plants. I don't know how to keep
But you
them
gotta
alive
learn.
very well. So yeah, I'm. It's a step, and we'll see how it goes. So
A step in the direction of becoming a murderer of some kind.
plant murderer, yes. Hopefully, no other kind of murder. Hopefully, crossing my
Sure.
fingers.
Sure. It could happen though.
You never know, but
One thing leads to another.
it does. But hopefully not that.
Hopefully not that.
But that does conclude my Rose Thorn and Seed for the week. Well, yeah, past couple weeks, I guess. But how about yourself? What's been going on? What's your Rose Thorn Seed?
Lot less beachy, lot less sunny. Maybe some more dark clouds, maybe some more thunder and lightning on my end. I'll start with my thorn because it's the funniest thing I have. Um, on the phone, I'm hearing the phrase computer illiterate more than I should, and it frustrates the heck out of me. Most of the time, it's in reference to like people scheduling and or not scheduling, and it is presented as though it's like my fault that we are, a modern business that hosts pages online. It's really frustrating to hear it presented as though it's some like disability, as though they can't learn. It makes me wonder, where did you find our phone number? You must have Googled us. You're calling me on a smartphone. I do not want to hear computer illiterate. But alas, I'm hearing it more and more, and it's like it's really funny, but yeah, overall it can be pretty frustrating. So that's my thorn here for the week.
Yeah, I mean, it's super frustrating. I had a resident previously, and like, really nice guy. He and his wife bought me a case of beer when they left because I was so helpful to them. But the guy, like, is making six figures and all at a job, and he hunt and peck types, and like couldn't figure out how to reset his Gmail password or do, like, he would just send me things and be like, how do I do this on my computer? Like, just things that are like, he was just lived at my property for a bit.
Okay.
And he would just like, I became his personal IT person. I feel like I probably mentioned it at one point, but it was like, nice guy, but like super needy. And I'm like, computers have been around for like over, like, in the general normal use for like 25 years at least. You cannot tell me that in the past 25 years that you have not had the opportunity to learn how to use a computer, even like remotely. Like, it is not hard to shop on Amazon. It is not hard to order food online through Grubhub, DoorDash, the website for the whatever. It is not hard to like book an appointment through a page that you Google the name of the business, you click on their website name, or even better, sometimes Google is like, hey, here's the booking link, like, schedule an appointment without you even going to the website and finding where the tab is to book the thing.
Oh yeah, it's super easy. And what's crazy is like it's not even that we're asking them to do like, calculus quizzes. We're not asking them to do, like a
Day,
Pictionary thing.
time.
No, dude, it's literally I just need an email to send you like my intake. I all I need is your email, and it blows my mind that people like don't even have that.
I've run into people who don't have an email address in property.
There you go. So yeah,
They
there you
want
go.
me to send them a paper application in the mail. I'm like,
Dude, who's got 3 weeks to wait for that?
well, I mean, if I do that for anyone, they just literally don't get the apartment because by the time the letter would even get to them, apartments are
Right.
gone right now. Like, it's
Right.
not, it
Yeah,
ain't
that's
happening.
insanity. That's insanity. So yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I digress. Um, I don't I don't want this to become a tirade about my parents' generation or whatever. But yeah, it's just it's an endemic. It's something. But yeah, my rose is I believe a good thing is to be more grateful. I think I take a lot of things for granted and I don't take the time or effort necessary to like show people that I am thankful and or grateful. I think it's quite easy to take things as like expected or whatever. So that was an idea that came to my mind, and in my like, what would you say, like my meditations, I'm working on that and just practicing gratefulness like personally and working on like how to work it into normal life better. So that's just like one thing I've been thinking about with those. And then my seed, more importantly than that, I started therapy sessions at a local uh, like therapy place, mental health and behavioral science place, and I'm excited about it. I think it was a good step forward. Will update in the future, but it's just I think it was a good thing, and I'm thinking about it. I'm looking forward to it again. So yeah, I am just on the train now and happy to be here. Overall, I just think it's going to be a good thing, and hopefully it gets things back on track. But that, sir, is my rose, thorn, and seed here for the week. I'm very much excited to talk a little bit about the Austrian Grand Prix. I know we had a week off. If you didn't catch the race companion for that race, go check it out. But yeah, let's get into some Formula One talk here.
Definitely. And so my weaving, so a couple of like little side tracks before we get to the Austrian Grand Prix, but my weaving down the straights comment was just short story. I will try my best to keep it short for everyone, but I was driving to work like last week at some point, and I'm stuck in pretty slow traffic. Just like there are normal sections of the highway that are just slower, and this guy behind me in like a Ford Fiesta is just freaking zigzag in the lane, not like crossing over, but just like zigzagging back and forth behind me, and I'm like, man, this guy's just trying to get heat in his tires. Like, I don't know what he's waiting for or what he's racing to, but he's getting ready for when the traffic picks up.
That's funny.
But it was the first thought that came into my mind. It was literally so slow in traffic. I grabbed my phone real quick and had Siri like start a note to be able to like keep that in my memory, because I was like that's just too funny.
Man. Yeah, he was keeping him warm, making sure he didn't didn't get him all hard and cold.
Yeah, and the other little short story was Colleen and I. She cracks me up. She's one of the funniest people I know. I will always say that. But we're
lucky, bro.
She makes me laugh, and she laughs at my jokes. So like I'm good.
Yeah, that's a keeper then.
Because I mean, my jokes are not good, so that works for me. But we're getting ice cream, and I'm like, we're standing in line, and there's these little shits of kids that are like at the front they were like being little assholes.
I believe you. Hey, I believe you.
13, 12, somewhere in that range, and
not
they're
useful age yet. I hear you.
Well, they're like ordering at the window. They're like trying to be funny to each other, so they're like calling the girl who's working there like sweetie. I think I heard sugar tits.
Yo, that's like, so funny.
And I'm like, it's like 8:30 on a Wednesday. We're sitting in line, like there's like it's mostly adults. I'm just like, they're like talking to each other while they're waiting for their ice cream, and the little windows like slid closed. They're like, oh, like we should smash the rest of our ice cream on the fucking window, and all, like just being dumb kids. I'm like, right. I want these kids out of here. They're annoying. It made me feel old, but while we're sitting there, Colleen goes, oh, that's got to be like the Lando Norris rule. And I'm like, what are you talking about, the Lando Norris rule? And she's like, oh, like you got to have pubes to call someone sweetie, because I showed her there's a driver interview, like pre-race interview from a couple years ago, where they're talking to Lewis about his mustache, and he's like, oh, I can't really grow one. And Lando's like, oh, yeah, like me neither, next to him. And Danny Ricks just goes across Lewis as like barely heard by the mic, and the journalists like didn't catch it, but he goes, do you even have a pube yet? And Lando just like is trying to hold it in for so long, and they like, the journalists are like continuing to ask questions, and Lando is just like cannot keep it together. Like when you're trying to not laugh at something that you think's funny, and it just makes you want to laugh more. He's fully like that in the press conference, like giggling to the point where he starts crying. He's laughing so hard. Like has to take off his monitors out of his ears and like just kind of like call it quits on the press conference. So I had showed Colleen this, and she's like, yeah, that's Lando Norris rule. Like these kids don't have pubes. They can't be going around calling these people sweetie.
Damn, I don't know. I don't know if it's a good thing to be commenting on children's pubes in public.
I mean, it wasn't. It wasn't like that. It's like these kids are
Sure,
way too young to be like
sure,
saying shit like that.
sure.
But you get the gist. Anywho, into real F1 news. For one, Michael Massey leaves the FIA. So that was something that happened recently. I know there had been talks of him potentially coming back into like a more key role in the FIA. So I thought it was interesting seeing him leave. It seems like it's for family reasons and whatnot.
Okay.
But then Keanu Reeves was at this past race in Austria, and apparently he is creating a F1 documentary for Disney Plus. So something out there on the horizon to look forward to. And then, of course, there was Colton Herta got his testing in with McLaren in the 2021 McLaren F1 car. So got some drive time in it. And it seems like Zach Brown is just trying to like stack as many quality drivers as he can in there. Like, I don't think he cares what racing series these guys are in because they've still got Herta. They scooped up Alex Palou. Danny Ricks says he is still like planning to be racing in F1 for McLaren at least for the next year and has no intentions of leaving F1. They're building this little force of drivers, and it's going to be interesting to see where all the like driver lineups kind of shake out. I know that's a ways down the road, but I just find it interesting how many different drivers they're bringing on, as well as like looking to get testing in F1 and like the different series. I think that's a pretty cool system, but interesting because I don't think many other teams really do it as much.
They had like, obviously they have the young driver programs and junior drives and these things, but it sounds a little bit different when the teams are trying to cultivate what sounds more like a little bit of a baseball farm system where you're keeping these guys like in the family racing for the McLaren name, like you were saying, in various different series, getting sponsorships for these individuals on their way up in their own careers, whether or not that means that they're like being groomed for a Formula One seat, who knows? But
Yeah.
I think the more interesting thing would be to see of the IndyCar drivers that are getting looked at by Formula One organizations like McLaren, and if this is like a two-part question, if it works out for McLaren where like Herta and Palou end up being like really good grabs in, they have good careers, they test well in a Formula One car, if that looks good from the other organizations, it may be something that they're going to want to do then too. And then you have these instances where now we're going to have a bunch of different drivers to look at and compare of the North American IndyCar drivers coming over and racing Formula One. How does their skill level compare? Are they like tougher drives? Are they easier drives? And then you really get this like sense of comparing and contrasting. Thank you, Sarah. Where I'm not sure we've seen that many IndyCar drivers in Formula One and then be successful, but it sounds as though Formula One is gearing up to have a large influx of them, at least testing.
Yeah, and it just seems different from what we've previously seen because we have seen obviously drivers from F1 go and race in other series for
Sure.
their teams. We saw Alex Albon go and race for Red Bull in, I believe it was Formula E. We've seen Antonio Giovinazzi go and race in like other series, supercar series and whatnot, after being kind of dropped from the F1 teams that they're in, or not kept on as the starting driver lineup for their teams. So we've seen like drivers kind of get forced into the other series, but not as much this like potential for mixing around and swapping things up or giving people a shot from other series as much, where teams primarily seem to just pull up talent from the F2, F3 kind of like system. So it was it's interesting to see, and obviously, like I said, we're a ways away from seeing what's going to happen next year in IndyCar as well as F1, or in 2 years or whatnot. But locking in some of these really solid drivers for contracts, I think is and not really necessarily having enough spots for them all to start in either IndyCar or F1 is an interesting strategy.
Well, and it seems like they are at least competitive. They are at least like they're making waves enough that they're like getting looked at in an interesting way that I did not foresee encountering so much of a bleed over of names and organizations and series. It's like kind of exciting, kind of unexpected, honestly. But it has, the Romain Grosjean going over to IndyCar has given me a reason to tune into some of those races. They've been super exciting. And now through that, well, maybe not through that, but just like, kind of in tandem with, just in the same timeline, you have McLaren looking at Herta and Palou, as you're saying, at the top of some of the grids racing in IndyCar. We see Colton Herta doing quite well, and it's like it's kind of a cool thing. Just kind of curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, so I think we'll get more answers. We're kind of coming up on the midseason F1 break anyway, so who knows if we'll see any roster type announcements or anything like that. Figuring out what teams are going to do, but it's interesting and it's kind of exciting. I think that shaking things up on the different constructor and organizational levels can potentially cause waves in the rest of the teams, and who knows if other teams will react and similarly look to kind of do the same thing in the future. But we do have to get into the Austrian Grand Prix recap as well. I'll briefly give just the quick notes kind of from qualifying with Max making it to P1 in the quali, but Haas having a really good qualifying, as well as Alpine and Alexander Albon, all putting themselves in really good spots going into the sprint race for the weekend.
Yeah, and just like you said, it was a sprint race or qualifying on Friday, or traditional qualifying on Friday, and then sprint race for Saturday. And we had some drivers taking engine penalties, I believe. So there was some, lack of concern for the sprint race for some of the drivers, but obviously there were some individuals like Mick and Kevin, like you were saying, in the Haas that were able to put themselves up in a pretty good position then going into the sprint, with Kevin finishing seventh and then Mick finishing ninth. I think that's a great result for both of them, just in the small sprint, putting themselves in a position to have a good start in the race then on Sunday. I know those were like the two like big notes I think from Friday and Saturday was the spike in performance from the Haas vehicles. Obviously, you have individuals like Esteban Ocon up there in P6. That's really exciting. A Now, non-traditional finish from Lewis down in P8. Now, with some of the recent results, we're like, oh, well, he should be on the rise. Why isn't he up in P1? Just the champions dilemma in that scenario. But yeah, I always find the sprint weekends to be really exciting. There's just so much action and like jeopardy on each of the days. And yeah, I think here at the Austrian Grand Prix for the sprint, it like really delivered a lot of like super exciting storylines. Then leading into what was then a quite exciting race on Sunday.
Yeah, and it was definitely some interest with the sprint race because we had a couple things that we don't typically see. For one, Fernando Alonso was not able to start because his team forgot to take off his tire warmers, so he wasn't able to even participate in the sprint race, forcing him into starting from the back of the grid for the actual race on Sunday. Guan Yu Zhou, his car kind of dying as he's coming around on the formation lap and causing them to abort the start and do another formation lap. So just kind of weird, but as you had mentioned, the two Haas cars, that's kind of what I wanted to mostly talk about a little bit with them because they have Magnussen in P7. They had Mick in P8 fighting against Lewis and all. We're seeing them lap after lap. We're seeing Mick stay within the 1 second, getting the DRS off Magnussen. Lewis not being able to get past because of, one, I think just the Haas's DRS speed was just a bit too much, but also the straights on that track, it's the fastest lap times of any track in F1 currently, as far as I'm aware, and the straights just aren't long enough, and we saw this a number of times that the straights are not long enough always for the DRS to really kick in and give you that boost to like easily coast past, like we see on other tracks. But with the Haas cars, there was some frustration from Mick after the sprint race because he missed out on sprint race points, finishing in P9. Only the top 8 get points in the sprint. And so he was frustrated on a team level that the team didn't have Magnussen kind of ease back to keep him in that DRS and everything to be able to pull him along just for a couple more laps. I mean, they did it for the majority of the sprint race while Lewis was there, and it was I was surprised to see Magnussen break the 1 second in the first place, and I assumed initially that it was like Mick was struggling, but I think it was just his fight with Lewis was just slowing the car down, and I find it weird that Haas was not like really on top of Kevin to be like, hey, we have a shot at double points in the sprint race, like pull him along. I just find that odd.
Yeah, and maybe they were to a certain degree, but like how much does Kevin have to mess up his thing to like keep Mick going? I know there was a good amount of time that Mick was able to, settle into the DRS and keep Lewis behind him, but at a certain point, I think Lewis just had the pace to get by Mick, and it was better for them to at least keep the P7 rather than like get both of their cars overtaken if Kevin like slowed down too much, and especially, you know, um, I think it's hard to ask drivers to go slower.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting because I feel like they have the ability to I feel like we've seen other instances of teammates kind of pulling each other along and all, and so I was just surprised a little bit to see Haas kind of like. I don't think that Lewis would have caught Kevin if he had taken a quarter second off his lap time to keep Mick in the DRS. and I mean they're constantly in communication. I thought it was interesting that they didn't really prioritize it and they kind of let Mick fight it out. It was a really exciting fight, and him and Lewis were going back and forth, and Mick defended really well. I was very impressed with his driving. But it's hard to have the guy behind you in DRS that many laps, and then when you don't get it, it makes it next to impossible to keep Lewis behind.
Yeah, and I guess like in that instance, Esteban Ocon was a little bit further ahead of Kevin, so it's not like Kevin was really racing Esteban.
Yeah,
So yeah, from that perspective, I think I would tend to agree with you actually.
but I mean, it's still just the fact that we're like talking about Haas and like how they could fight for more points, not just points
It's
in general.
exciting.
Like that's a cool thing after the past few years, but getting then into the sprint race or into the actual race,
Mhm.
we had seen the Ferraris kind of fight it out between each other in the sprint, but in the actual race, they kind of just went. Leclerc went, and they didn't. They really held each other up a lot in the sprint, and they were not going to do or to make the same mistake on Sunday in the race.
Yeah, they seem to be a little more in sync with each other, and especially when you have Charles and Carlos in winning positions, you don't want to see the Ferraris like stumbling over themselves, especially when they're having reliability issues on top of it. This race is not the first time that we saw a Carlos or a Charles DNF out of the race due to just reliability. We saw, Carlos trying to climb out of a burning vehicle as it's moving backwards during this race. So you hate to see the drivers fighting each other when they are still like fighting the vehicle to a certain degree. However, I think Charles drove a great race, especially in the sense of Carlos being out, not getting maximum possible points for the Ferrari camp. Yeah, I think it was a good day for Charles in that regard. That that he was able to bring some good points for the Scuderia.
Yeah, and his first win not from pole position, which was very exciting. Seeing Leclerc, like he looked really good. He was making good moves, but the Ferrari just really seemed to have a bit more pace than the Red Bull this week or this past race. And I was surprised by that. Like they forced Red Bull into having to readjust their pit strategy. The car for Red Bull was not maintaining the tires super well, so they kind of tried to go for I guess it was a 3-stop instead of a 2-stop. And Ferrari just kind of had them at every corner, every turn, except for Sainz car blowing up. But Leclerc was making really solid moves, and his passes on Max, like Max just wasn't even able to make. He defended for a couple turns, and then it was just Leclerc was gone. So it was interesting to see because I don't think we really know exactly how the Ferrari got this new pace that they have. I didn't really see anything about new upgrades or whatnot, but they really whether it was the setup or the car or whatnot, they really had it dialed in for the track there at the Red Bull Ring.
I think a lot of things factor into it. I mean, they've been fast all season, so like it's not a surprise in that sense. I think I'm pretty sure it's 3 DRS zones there in Austria. So you do get a lot of opportunities to make speed up. He was quick in the corners, and also it's a really short lap. Not a whole lot of um, I don't think it is an input heavy circuit in that scenario. So maybe in that case, Charles just has the upper hand on a track like that over Max. Because you're right, it wasn't even tense. It was it was a second and a half by the end of the race that Charles had up on Max, so it was significant. Commenting on the reliability issues, though, parity in that sense for the Red Bulls and Ferraris. Sergio out as well of the race for different things, but just in a points grabbing scenario,
Yeah, I agree, especially like with Checo being out, the fact that Ferrari was lined up for a 1-2 and they just couldn't take it because of that engine reliability. It's disappointing, I think, for all Ferrari fans. I think it's concerning because you're like, they're just burning through engines at this point. They're going to be taking engine penalties. Like, you're already prepared for it. That's going to be Carlos's third, I think, power unit out of 3 or 4 that they get for the season, and it's only 10 races out of the 22, 23 we've got. Like, that's definitely a concern. And with, like you said, the car being on fire, scary moment. Carlos kind of struggling to get out because he's like, I have to either hit the brake or hop out of the car, but he needed to do both on the hill. I mean, that car was in, like, that entire car is going to need to be rebuilt. The amount of fire that burned through stuff on there, that's going to be a brand new car probably for this coming race.
yeah, big time.
But like you mentioned with Checo going out, there was some conversation from George's side as he and Checo kind of collided, and Checo ended up just not being able to make it up through the pack after the damage, and I think they just retired the car to save the engine, save what they could. But George was like not very happy with the 5-second penalty he got. I thought it was pretty reasonable, if not light. He said it was a harsh penalty, but it's the same kind of thing. It was the same thing that we saw between Max and Lewis last year at Silverstone, or was that last year? Yeah, last year at Silverstone, where they collided similarly. Checo coming around the outside, George hitting him and sending him off. Not as crazy or hard of a crash like when Max was at Silverstone and he and Lewis came together. But, I mean, George finishes P4. Checo ends up out of the race. I thought a 5-second penalty was light. Like, I feel like in those instances where you see 2 cars come together and one car is ahead and, like, by enough, Checo got hit towards the rear of the car, so at least like half of the car was ahead. I feel like there's gotta be, and they both seem to have room. I feel like that is reasonable to be penalized in those instances, whether it's a Red Bull car getting hit or anyone else. Like, if someone ends up having to bow out of the race because you hit them, because I don't know, whether you're steering locked up, either way, like, that's still on you.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree, but like, drivers are not paid to let the other guy in the door first. I think they're always going to fight for their own position and their own team, because very easily, I think drivers could believe that if they don't stand up for themselves in the face of the media against rulings, they may feel as though they'll get treated maybe unfairly if the FIA sees them as a little bit of wet blankets, where they'll call them on track limits where maybe not somebody else. So I think the drivers truly see it as like giving no attack vector, saying like, oh no, that's like unreasonable, it's just like a driving incident. It feels tactics. It feels like, oh well, he's going to argue for his side if the shoe was on the other foot. So I believe basically what I'm saying is I think it's an unfortunate symptom of just hyper competitiveness where we might want to see the sportsman like thing and be like, yeah, 5 seconds is reasonable. I touched the guy, he went out. Like that's big unfortunate. Sorry to hear that for Checo. And 5 seconds, that's fine. Sure, that'd be the sportsman thing to say. I just don't expect it from these guys, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable expectation. It's just bizarre to me in an instance, especially when George takes a 5 second penalty. He still finishes P4,
Yeah.
probably as well as he was going to anyway.
No, no, no. If it's not for that 5 second penalty, and he would have been ahead of Lewis, they stole his race. Honestly, like it's an unfair call. Like, do you see how easy it is to argue though? Like,
Yeah, a 17-second gap to Lewis at the end of the
honestly though,
race.
if my tires weren't messed up, I would have had so much more pace. Like, honestly, if Checo didn't run into me, I would have been on the podium.
I mean, I can understand where it's coming from, but at the same time, I think like you have to be somewhat logical. You can disagree as a driver. You can disagree with the opinion, be like, oh, I don't know if that was the right call, but nonetheless, I still like we had a great race, put the car up in P4, like really solid. It is what it is, I think, but to be like, oh, I did nothing wrong. That's really harsh. It was just a racing incident where I took another driver, like caused another driver to not be able to finish. Just a racing incident. Like
Yeah.
that's I don't know. I don't expect them to just like bend over and be like, yes, FIA, yes, I bow to you and all your wishes, but I also just found it odd in the scenario. You're 17 seconds out of P3 at the end of the race. It was only a 5 second penalty. I just don't see it being an area to complain. But yeah, nonetheless, speaking of track limits, as you mentioned, that was the other kind of note that I had. There were 43 track limit violations throughout the race. I don't know what to make of that. That seems like things are either being policed way too closely or something needs to be like I've been impressed with the FIA this season in terms of how they've handled the rulings. I've talked about it a couple times. I'm glad to see them like being strict and like following the rules like very closely. I feel as though there had to be some sort of disconnect between the FIA and the drivers for this race if there's that many offenses. Like these are very good professional drivers. They are like
Maybe not if they can't color inside the lines.
they're
I think that's like the FIA's argument is like the track is the track, stay on it.
I know, but I feel like we have not seen that, and I'm sure there are other tracks that there have been like I understand like being if it's like significantly like off track whatever, but I feel like this has probably happened throughout the season already and it was never policed this way. And one thing that I kind of learned from like reading up a little bit on this is that I forget if it was that I read this after like 2 races ago or after this past race, but that there are 2 like FIA race directors that are like swapping back and forth and like different stewards and marshals and or different stewards per race. The marshals change pretty much every track, but like I felt like it was a weird inconsistency or kind of like outlier that this race had that many offenses. I feel like other tracks have to have had plenty that just went. They were like, it's fine. Like it was barely over. It is what it is.
Well, maybe the number isn't as uncommon and it may happen more at particular tracks than others, but also maybe from just like a storytelling perspective, we were getting more, like we were seeing more of the deleted times. And especially because correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the one where they were going off where I believe it's like turn 10, the final turn into the pit straight. Like I think a lot of them were going off on a couple particular corners. So like that to me is worth policing. Like if it was 43 different offenses, but at a bunch of different corners, like there were a bunch of hot spots on the track, I think that paints a very different story than drivers just trying to like boil it into one or two different turns. Because then it's symptomatic of like, oh, they're just trying to gain an advantage. They're just trying to put their car like further off the line to be able to get a better exit going down the pit straight. So I think depending on what the heat map of the overages was tells a different story. I just say that to say it might also be symptomatic of the broadcast as well, where they didn't have as much this or that to show us. So we were very privy then to these offs, to these radio messages. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, chicken or the egg, whatever. Just kind of just throwing some ideas that come to my mind.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more the like consistently at the same corners going off, but I think because the thing that I think caught everyone's eye was like, I mean, we would know at other tracks if people were getting the black and white flag waved at them for track limit violations, and we had like 8 different drivers getting black and white flagged at least throughout the race, which is just it's wild, and it kind of caused some of the drivers to be like, put gravel back, like give us walls. Like if you're gonna be that like nitpicky about like an inch over the line, then like just put the gravel back. But
Yeah, and from a driver's perspective, to keep hearing that same bullshit on the radio, eventually I would just be like, give me fucking gravel then, just get out of my ear.
yeah, I think it was just a surprising stat because I think it is an outlier a bit in terms of how it's been policed. I don't think it
I
was.
think you're right.
I don't think it was a big deal necessarily in this race, but it just like was odd that, and I think it highlighted a little bit the fact that there are like some differences in the way the rulings are going like race to race. I think with the multiple race director approach, I think they're both like doing their best to keep things like by the book, but if every driver is going off an extra inch at one turn, then no one's gaining an advantage, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
Yeah,
So
no, I agree with you in that regard.
yeah, but that does, I guess, kind of. There was my last note from the Austrian Grand Prix. So Lewis gets his 3rd podium of the season,
Mhm.
and now this season is the longest in his F1 career that he has gone into a season without winning a race.
Mm.
Previously, it was 10 races into the season. That was the longest it took him to get a win. So now we're going into race 11, coming up here at the French Grand Prix at I believe it's the Paul Ricard circuit.
Hmm.
So Lewis with his longest drought into a season without a win.
However, he is, it seems to be ramping up. Couple of podium finishes, and I bet a win is right around the corner for this guy. Because yeah, he's endured a lot at the front half of this season, and it seems like some of those struggles are beginning to pay off with some what appears to be increased reliability for the vehicle and therein, for Lewis. So yeah, we'll see what he can get done because I know coming up this may be. I think this is a landmark weekend for him in some regard.
Yeah,
So yeah,
300th Grand Prix, I believe, is
very
the
exciting.
yeah. So
Interesting note about Paul Ricard in, I believe it was like 7 different championships. This was an interesting little like trivia note about the track. The driver who won at Paul Ricard that year went on to win the world championship then. So they see it as some kind of like landmark track in a driver's conquest of the championship and looking for that trophy. So I think that's quite an interesting note. A lot of people talk about Silverstone as being one of these marquee races. They think about Monaco as being one of these races like, oh well, if you can win here, you can repeat. So I think as a little bit of a historical element looking forward to the race this weekend. I'm going to keep my eye on that, note who wins this, and see if we can add another tick to that little trivia box for this year.
yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it's because of the circuit itself. It does have some really long straights, but also some pretty tight chicanes and turns. So I think maybe part of that is kind of brings out the most well-rounded car and driver potentially. So maybe that's part of that. But that's a really interesting stat in terms of things. I obviously like you were saying with Silverstone, Monaco, the Paul Ricard with the French Grand Prix. These are tracks have that have been raced on enough times for there to be a stat like that. So they are, like you said, those marquee races. But still, for that specific track to kind of have the winner end up being the world champion that many times, you'd have to tell me how many of those 7 are Lewis, and then maybe I'll change my mind on it. But that's a
Well,
pretty cool stat.
interestingly, we there was a large break from 1990 to 2018.
Oh, okay.
So, like, it's going to be a bunch of different drivers from not Lewis's era. He would have had a chance, and maybe, 2018 on, we do see a lot of Lewis. But I think there would be some pretty interesting names on that list. But also, I was looking at because that trivia really stuck out to me. So I was looking at when the race usually is. The French Grand Prix usually takes place in the summer months. Halfway through the season, a lot of times it was like between race 9 and 12.
Hmm.
So if that's halfway through a season, it's a track where drivers would have been able to clinch the victory possibly at like the halfway point or be later in the season because as we know the F1 seasons were not as long as they are now. There would have been tracks raced in different sectors of the seasons. I said to say a lot of things could factor in, but I think it's a romantic element of the track that can set up some interesting storylines.
Definitely, and we have some reports that Red Bull is going to be bringing some upgrades to Power Card. There's some concerns. It sounds like that the upgrades they're working on won't quite be ready by this race, so they may not may end up being the following. Um, but it will be a very exciting time. Off weeks for races are boring. Race weeks are fun. I'm looking forward to it and to having more F1 in our lives. So
Yeah, always fun. Now, like we had mentioned, if you missed it, Austrian Grand Prix Race Companion is live on YouTube right now. Go check it out. And we will have more in the future, obviously. But I think that kind of covers the Austrian Grand Prix, kind of sets us up a little bit. Looking forward to the French Grand Prix. Any other elements you wanted to hit?
no, I think that kind of covers everything. Like you said, check out the race companion if you want to get more thoughts of our of ours during the race. Getting into some League of Legends, though, we had a couple of points of news for TSM. TSM is dropping the dead weight forcibly, it sounds like, in multiple areas. We see that Huni is stepping down from the starting top lane position for TSM because of some long-term wrist issues. So unfortunately, he's not able to kind of maintain the performance he wants to with those wrist issues and probably amount of time being able to practice and whatnot. And then, of course, we had Mr. Andy Din, Reggie Bro being banned from Riot events and involvement for 2 years minimum. So TSM is just, I'm fully expecting them to be on a tear, to be winning every single match that they have going forward. Now that they have lost some of those things that may have been holding them back. Huni due to injury and Reggie due to meddling.
Not financial advice, but I think the Tall and Short of It podcast is betting big on TSM.
Oh, yeah.
Not financial advice. Bet
Yep.
big on TSM.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Bet big on TSM.
Interesting strategy. Yeah, happy to hear it. Honestly, I know as somebody outside of the industry, it's been pretty well understood that that individual has been not that great for a lot of environments that he's been a part of. So I am interested to see what TSM gets with 2 years free of, this raging little short man. We'll see what happens. Interested to see who they put in as like stand-in CEO or leader of the cult, whatever. But yeah, we'll see. I'm happy to hear it though.
Yeah, I think well, just in general, like the whole situation, we've obviously seen it. It's been well documented by TSM's video crew
Yeah,
of him and his different incidents with teammates, players under him when he was not playing, things like that. And I think it's just better overall for probably everyone. Maybe it'll let Reggie get some stress out of his life where he's able to not worry about involving himself in the day to day with the League of Legends team because he wants to relive the glory days, and hopefully there will be one less crying TSM member at least moving forward. But
well said.
jokes aside, I am interested to see how TSM kind of performs with bringing in a new top laner midway through. Well, really 3/4 of the way through this season, with the spring split in the past and halfway now into the summer split. That's a big shift, and so I don't know really how that's going to shake out. I know that they have Soul in the top lane, and I don't know much about him. I saw he played pretty well in one of the matchups this past week against FlyQuest, but that is not the game we're covering. First game we're covering, CLG, 100 Thieves. What were your thoughts going through the game? I was, as always, impressed by Closer, the Poppy. What a champ.
Yeah, and okay, so starting with the CLG game, I'm pretty sure like Luger for CLG is not the hero we need. There were a lot of moments there that were like questionable play from him with like just gun choice and positioning in the team fights. So I cannot help but immediately just like lock into what 80 carries are doing in the team fight. So I think to start off, just from looking at the bottom lanes between the two, I mean, FBI and FBI and Huhi are quite the well-oiled machine. They are they are good at what they're good at, and I do believe they tend to shore up each other's weaknesses. But the difference in the bottom laners was glaring, and I think that's like a decent lens to look at this game from.
Yeah, I definitely agree because Luger, it was weird. Like, and jokes about auto spacing aside, like he was not leaving himself in a position, like you said, positioning during team fights. I remember specifically there was one dragon fight where he is like below the dragon pit towards red buff on blue side, and he has the Jinx rockets ready to go, but he's just not autoing because he's too far outside of the range because he's so overly concerned about getting locked down by the Braum, the Silas, whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, you may not die immediately in the team fight if you're that far away, but you're also not putting out any damage at all. I mean, they have the Vi and the Nautilus that are able to like go in, engage, start stuff, and Luger's just sitting out there, not really doing anything, trying to throw a zap out there here and there to get a little damage, and then engage after getting the slow on someone. But if you miss that, he was just standing there waiting.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too. Like a lot of the gold from CLG was pumped into him. Obviously, I think Dokla had a pretty standout game on the Fiora. But if you look at the damage charts, a lot of gold was funneled into Luger. He spent a decent amount of time just soaking up waves in the side lane and in the mid lane when they had Palafox and Dokla split in the side lanes. There was a good amount of time where Dokla on the Fiora had pressure in the side lane. But if so much gold is going into the AD carry, him being 0-3 and not getting it to not capitalizing on that investment, it's really unfortunate. And then, you look from the other side, you have an 8-2-5 FBI who pops off in these fights. Obviously, he has a lot more mobility before a kill, but it just goes to show like the focus of play from the bottom laners in a scenario where they are getting gold funneled into them and they are expected to be, damage outputs. You can see the difference there as well. And just from like a team coordination, I want to talk about a moment from early in the game where closer on the Poppy was looking to at least establish a presence in the top lane. So through ward coverage, they know where Contracts is. Closer shows presence topside, and because Hundred Thieves knows that they're making their Riverside weak, they move up FBI and Huhi. They take bottom side Scuttle while Closer was messing around top lane and trying to establish a presence and some pressure up top. So not only are they like being an outlet for gold in the games, they're also actively having control over the macro as well and locking down areas of the map that, I'm sorry, Luger and Poom had no pressure in what seems like a decently fine matchup to me.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, I think a lot of pressure was lost through that bottom side, and it was just able to let the supportive Abadaga on the Silas just go crazy. 6-1 and 10. He was a part of so many of these kills. Yeah, it was a really good look for Hundred Thieves.
Yeah, and looking at that as well with the bot lane and that move taking the scuttle, that's just like really heads up play and like smart play from the side of Hundred Thieves in their bot lane, like saying, "Oh, we don't have our jungler anywhere close to support us if we do end up in a 3v2. Well, let's just not end up in a 3v2. Let's take the scuttle, like wrap back around to bot lane, like they'll have pushed in the lane by then and we can just catch our wave at the turret and not be under any pressure." So really really smart decision making from them, and it did lead of course to them kind of dominating the dragons, getting that Baron, and just winning the game in general. Their macro and well, just overall gameplay looked really solid. I was pretty impressed, but I was, after seeing CLG perform pretty well early on in the season, I've been a little disappointed with them as of late. They've kind of dropped a couple games recently and have not looked quite as competitive. So I guess we'll see how they continue forward. Like you said, Dokla was kind of a shining point for them. But their bot lane is definitely a glaring weakness against these top teams that we've got, like
Yeah.
100 Thieves.
Yeah, definitely agree. The one note that just from like a pick a ban perspective for CLG, I don't think I like the Vi in this scenario. You have a secondary engage tool, that you have someone able to engage that isn't Poom on the Nautilus, but I'm not sure Vi fits well into the meta right now. She doesn't seem like the way to go, especially in the case of, like, to be fair, a Viego is open in that scenario, so it just seems weird to go for like just a B tier jungler in that scenario. So I'm curious if that's like a champion pool thing, if they feel like that's the right way to be playing, if they feel like maybe it's a little bit behind, but like a comfort pick. I'm not sure, but obviously 04 and 5 didn't really work out.
I think it's one of those like snowball type picks where you have to kind of get a lead with it, where its current state is, because the idea I think behind it is, oh, Vi gets ahead, Vi gets a couple early damage items, and then gets really tanky. And then it's a great source of engage. It's a great source because you have your Q where you can throw yourself and punch, or you have your ult that really locks people down. And if you're ahead, then the Azir, the Jinx can hit from the outside while you're locking someone down in a team fight. If the Vi doesn't get ahead there and just kind of ends up where it did, you're really not offering anything. Every time you're throwing yourself in there, you're just getting blown up. So it's high risk, high reward kind of thing, but it didn't play out super well. And I think that's in big part due to Closer and his play being able to kind of keep track of contracts throughout the game, be first to lanes on ganks and on skirmishes and everything, and put himself in kind of that proactive position, that kind of puts the Vi behind if she's trying to counter engage as opposed to starting things off.
So you definitely want to be the one making the play, not the one showing up to the play. So yeah, definitely low ceiling there for the Vi in this game.
Yeah, but moving to the next game that we had for the
Sure.
LCS, we've got EG Team Liquid. What set itself up for a very exciting matchup, and I just found that there was just I mean, there was a big problem for me with TL's team comp, which stood out very significantly in this matchup, and it was really the Bjergsen Zillion didn't have the damage around it to be able to win team fights. We're seeing this fight. We're seeing Impact getting ahead a little bit in the top lane early, but really throughout the game, TL and EG, every time they're fighting, it is, I'm on the edge of my seat. People's health is getting low, and EG is juggling the damage so well. They are handling all of that, and even with Zillion having his ultimate to bring someone back. Every time they're blowing someone up, it's in a position where even if they're coming back to life, they're just going to get blown up again. The short range that TL had was like my biggest weakness because the Zillion then like can't really do anything because
he just had to walk out of the fight.
And every time someone's being resurrected, they are so close to the enemy team because they had to be able to put out their damage or even be there in the first place. And so there was that, and then just the sustained damage in general. Like, you have a Nami who's just being supportive, healing, throwing out bubbles, throwing out ults, not really like any source of damage. The Volibear, not a big source of damage. And then with Blippo on the Aatrox, he is having to get in there constantly to put out any damage. And with the range and the CC that you have from a Gnar, a Lissandra, Ezreal, Yuumi with the range and poking ability, like, Blippo's never going to be able to get in there. He's never going to be able to do what he needs to on the Aatrox. And so they just don't have any sustained damage other than the Lucian and the Zillion. And Zillion is not really building as a AP damage heavy like role. He's not a carry. That's a supportive mid laner.
Right. Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Short range team comp against a decent amount of poke and sustained damage poke. The Danny on the Ezreal had 2 items before anybody as they were setting up for, the second Drake, I believe. Like, his Qs were just chunking so hard. So that really was like the Ezreal show, just being able to outrange them. And then, to be fair, right at the end, I honestly think if Team Liquid got a good fight, I do believe they were able to win if Hans was going to be able to stay out of the range of the Lissandra ult, but he just had to be right next to them during the Baron fight, flashes that wall, and the fight just was over.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to tell. I know Evil Geniuses had a pretty good grip on the game before that, but that was nail in the coffin. Team Liquid is out.
Oh yeah. And I think the biggest issue is I don't think that Lucian can. I don't think that his auto attack range is further than Lissandra's ult range.
It's likely the same range.
So, like, if you are close enough to throw one auto at the Lissandra, you are dead or locked down minimum. So, I think was the biggest the biggest issue with Team Liquid. I think even so, they fought so well in the team fights. They were really trying, but they just could not get the sustained damage that they need out there to end up killing off the EG members. They were just constantly slivers of health, walking away, 4 guys below 25% health, and no one dead on the team. And you're just like, that's crazy. So really impressive from EG to play out their comp well. But I wasn't disappointed in Team Liquid's play as much as I was just with their draft really put them in a bad spot.
Yeah, so, definitely agree.
But that was that's all the notes that I had for those games. Did you have anything else before we move on to the LCK?
No, that about covers it. I think just small note: the triple teleport always can catch teams out. There's a fight in the top lane where they had the Ezreal TP advantage. Were able to show up with 2 people instead of 1. That was like a big turning point. And again, like you were mentioning, that's like a pick ban thing. You're thinking of that before the game. So yeah, just a heads up little addition to that Yuumi Ezreal strategy that could like bring it over the top and be like, oh yeah, I don't mind to see that. They're bringing the TP. Danny's ready to move. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and I think being able to bring the Yumi with you, obviously with the
So
teleport,
good.
it's huge.
So good.
And I think also knowing kind of the early weaknesses of the Ezreal Yumi, it also benefits you in the early game. You're putting yourself in a position where you're gonna potentially lose Lucian. Nami is really strong early game in lane. And so, if you're already planning to need to TP back to lane to make up CS and everything, then it works out, and then you're able to utilize that well later on. So,
Yeah, big time.
but moving over to the LCK, we were looking at the Gen.G and Nongshim Red Force matchup. I expected Gen.G to win, but this was pretty dominant through both games from them. Um,
Right.
Ruler looked insane. Kind of the opposite of what in game one of what we saw from Luger. He was constantly just like there putting out good damage. Just making a big impact on the game. But Peanut and Doran also really did a good job of shutting down Canna in the top lane early, not letting him get really anywhere.
Yeah, the top lane focus really strong. I want to ask in game one because I don't have like too many notes, so I'll ask this question instead. So in the pick and ban, they talked about what do you pick against a Silas? Because Gen.G first picked Silas, which is interesting. A lot of times you're answering something with the Silas to steal the ult. So the question was, what do you pick against Silas as the counter pick?
Corky.
BDD obviously answers with a Syndra. Corky, I think, is a really good answer. One of the things that came up was Oriana, and it was the Oriana ult is practically useless for Silas, is what they said. I'm curious, do you agree? Is
Um,
Oriana like a bad pick or a good pick against Silas?
I think it's. I think Oriana has the general advantage in that matchup because it does have the ranged advantage. It does have a shield, so you're avoiding the Silas really getting on you and just like nuking you out with damage. But you also don't get to the point where he's able to really. And the only way that stealing Oriana ult is significant is he has to throw himself into the middle of your team to use it. And so I would say Oriana is definitely a decent. I wouldn't even say counter because it doesn't really stop Silas from doing what it wants to do, but just a good like favorable pick, I would say, in that lane matchup. I don't think it's like a crazy big advantage. I think Silas does fine against it in lane. It just is one less ultimate that you can really steal and have cause havoc. For me, Corky, like Silas steals Corky ult, he shoots out, he gets a shootout. One little like boop and it's done. So I think it does kind of the same general thing that you're looking for from the Syndra. You're looking for ranged poke damage. It gives you also not just the AP, but some of the AD damage when you have the Gwen, which is AP in the top lane. So it gives you some additional kind of mixed damage for your comp. And I think that with the range, you have the dash away, which Oriana doesn't. I think that would be my counter pick, especially with how strong Corky is right now, that comes to mind. But that would be. I don't think Oriana is necessarily like a hard counter to Silas. I think it's just like favorable matchup for Oriana.
Sure, yeah, and I think after your explanation, I would tend to agree. I thought, Silas, he's getting in melee range to do a lot of his damage, so the sombrero wouldn't be terrible. But yeah, overall, I guess that is like limited use cases, so sure. But yeah, other than that, I mean, the this series was clinical from Gen.G. There was just a lot of really clean play. Like the first game was over in in 17 minutes practically. Like it went a little longer than that, but the game winning fight was at 17 minutes. Chovy gets just a flank behind the Baron pit and just wrecks them.
Yeah.
Just gets in the middle of Nongshim and wrecks them from the great vision control that was set up previous to the fight. Ward control from these teams is immaculate, and they just push it home. Then going into game two, we see a lot of the same. Like you want to look at the Chovy BDD matchup. Chovy is out CSing BDD in a melee versus ranged matchup. You flip that, Chovy picks the Rise into the Silas, gets the better of that matchup. BDD had no advantage here today. Ruler gets his Twitch that he plays with the Yumi. That was disgusting. Like game two was even worse than game one.
Yeah, and my biggest note was that like Gen.G was just constantly dictating everything that was happening on the map. They were it starts out with a gank here or like, oh, we're gonna take dragon now, and it was like they were just moving so fluidly. Their macro was really impressive as they moved around the map and just kind of decided they're like, okay, we got pressure here, we got our objective. Okay, now we're gonna instantly transition into pressuring here. Oh, we got that objective. Okay, now we're gonna flow into this, pressure that lane, get a kill, get a tower, boom, done. On to the next thing. It was like you said, clinical. It was so smooth. Game two, especially, Nongshim didn't have a chance. You see, as soon as Rise hits 6 and Chovy and Peanut are instantly in the bot lane with the Realm Warp coming down, getting the double kill onto Ghost and Snowflower. Ruler and Lehens probably didn't need that, but they just snowballed it so hard.
Yeah.
Just constantly throughout the rest of the game seeing Ruler popping out with that Twitch ult and just evaporating people on the Nongshim team was just, it was exciting, and kind of a feel bad for Nongshim kind of moment. I'm like, oh, and there's the Twitch, and there was the Viego.
Mm-hmm. And it's gone.
Yeah, like it was not the closest matchup. Nongshim definitely like has a lot to take away, but I think they just unfortunately also have slightly like worse players in pretty much every role. So it's hard to be in that position. And not that Ghost, BDD, Canna, Snowflower, not that they're bad necessarily, but Ruler, Chovy, Lehens, Doran all just were playing better and are playing better. And so if you're just outmatched in that fight, you're typically going to lose, but Gen.G does it so well. Like 26-minute and 23-minute victories, that is pretty brutal.
Yeah, I would say so.
Cut down on my prep time for this week's episode a little bit.
Yeah, they definitely made it easy on us. That's for damn sure. But not the longest match there, but we saved the best for last. We had quite the barn burner over in LPL. We picked the Weibo Gaming and V5, which was quite the exciting matchup. I think there's a lot of good stuff to talk about there. So, did you have any further notes on the LCK match here?
No, I'm good moving over to V5 and Weibo.
Let's do it.
Yeah, and I mean, from game one, my biggest note was just the Jax.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it would be on yours too, but the Shy, like, they were able to really pressure and kind of look to put him in a good position early. SOFM coming to the top lane a couple different times to gank and get that lane advantage. And my other like game one kind of note was just that SOFM seemed to just be a step ahead of Karsa kind of every time. He was always being the proactive jungler that was making the play, where Karsa is kind of coming in late or coming into the top lane river brush and being like, the Gwen's dead already. I can't fight this 1v2, and just having to walk away. So getting the Jax ahead was obviously like a really, really solid solid way to play. And later on in the game, it was just nuts seeing him 1v2 and just push down lanes. Just thinking about him going down the bot lane and just pushing, like jumping on one person after another, just chasing people down. And you're like, why is he not taking any damage? He doesn't even have Counter-Strike up. Why is the Jax not getting hurt at all? He was a beast.
Yeah, absolute beast. That's a great way to put it. And from a lane assignment perspective, he was a big problem. You saw at 14 minutes, V5 struggled to put somebody up against the Jax that would just stop the pushing for a little bit. They tried to match Rookie up against him, and they obviously tried to match Rich up against him. Did not work. They tried to put, Fotik and Renata in a position where they can push mid, so then Rookie could follow the Jax.
Hey, say his name. PP God. Say his
PP
name.
God. But yeah, they could not match the Jax in any way. He gets excessively fed. But the thing that just blew my mind was the dragon fight where Jax was positioned below them and effectively 1v5 saying you either have to go through me or the other four members on the other side of you. And like both options were so scary. V5 literally runs into the Jax. Jax 1v3s against I'm pretty sure it was the Renata, the Aphelios, and the Lee Sin, all trying to keep him off of Fotik. It was like terrifying, honestly. When I was watching that, I burst out laughing afterwards. I burst out laughing, just like, what do you do against that? Like, that to me is quintessential Jax play. It is like, that is the epitome of the champion. He did it so well. He was such a problem for V5. And it continued straight into the next game. They fucking ban Jax. Burst, ban immediately. They say, get it the fuck out of here. We're not doing it again.
Yeah, and I mean it was the right call. It like
Big time.
It caused them so much grief in game one. Game two, V5 really did kind of set themselves up a lot better to bounce back. The top lane, Sejuani, I think was a decent counter to the Fiora in that lane phase. And
negates it at least.
Yeah, and with the Fiora, they didn't let the game get to the point where the Fiora split push matters. So that was the big key, was don't let it get super far ahead to snowball and be able to 1v3 like the Jax did. If you stop that from happening, then they have to look to play through the other lanes. And they just weren't able to get the advantages on the Weibo side that they did in the first game, because a lot of that did come through the top lane. The Viego got banned out as well, which definitely was a key. And then the Azir versus Sylas matchup, I think like the Azir ultimate is fine on Sylas. I think it's a good disengage, which they did need in this team comp and everything. But it just doesn't do much to like improve your lane in general. It's just kind of a more reactive like ult to be able to take. The Sylas pick with being able to take the Zero or the Sejuani ult, I think can be good. But in this game, it was just V5 kind of from the get-go. They controlled the dragons super well, and just kind of pressed through that bot lane, and Photic being able to get ahead and kind of pushed for the quick victory.
Yeah, they were definitely able to abuse the double range into range melee matchup. The TK and Senna weren't able to like develop any kind of pressure outside of that laning phase. I think they got shut down enough that the tankiness and the soul stacking from Senna just wasn't coming out. So yeah, lot to what's the word I'm looking for? A lot to neutralize the Weibo team comp. That's the word I was looking for, neutralize. But that sets us up for a game three. We're in a position, Weibo Gaming down in the standings, V5 clearly the favorite going into this series. But after game one, a decent game two performance, we have game three going up and possible upset scenario here for Weibo Gaming.
Yeah, and with V5 being undefeated in their series throughout the season, it was definitely exciting to see it that they're on the edge of kind of edge of a knife, see which way it goes. But Weibo played this out very, very well. They controlled objectives super well, which I was impressed by, but a lot of that came from the Shy in the top lane and SOFM again, similarly to game one. The Gnar was so good. He was able to counter some ganks in the top lane and then chase people down, getting I think either one if not two kills after losing SOFM in a 2v2 top lane.
Yep.
Was able to chase both down, I think, and really put himself in a position where no one could really counter him. He was doing on the Gnar the split push, going into different lanes, pressuring towers constantly, and then being able to come into the team fights and do a lot. But the Corki there in the mid lane too was huge. The damage to poke out before the team fights even happened, as we got later in the game, was stupid. Like those red ultimate. I was gonna say red rockets, and I thought before I said it, but might as well. Anyway, his third proc of his ultimate was just nuking people. Photic
Yeah, it was
was
enough
going.
to shut fights down.
Yeah, Photic was having it back out before fights even started. Same with Rookie. It was so strong.
And what was interesting, like looking at the pick and ban before they got into the game, like V5 just drafted three beefcakes with some like decent DPS in the Azir and the Jinx. But unfortunately, there were a lot of scenarios where those carries were just getting poked out with a couple of well-placed rockets from Angel on the Corki. And then, like, yeah, you have Engage, you have a lot of HP, but no damage to back it up.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I mean, it was a pretty low kill game. I think Weibo ended up playing the poke comp real or at least playing their team comp in a way where they were getting a lot of poke down before these fights and just slowly pushing V5 off of these objectives. Their carries are low, can't get in a good spot. And then on top of that, unfortunately, the big tank engage of the Shy was ahead and beefier than the other side in V5. So they just had advantages in a lot of scenarios. Having to play it much slower, 33 minutes, took a while to close it out, honestly. But Weibo was just measured, careful, and yeah, they were able to get it done with some very well placed rockets from Angel.
Yeah, and like we said, the objective control. I mean, getting all four dragons that were taken during the game, both barons, 11 turrets to one The one turret and the one Rift Herald were all that V5 got really in that game. And so even though it took them a little longer, it was kind of that slow choke hold that you're like, V5 is just slowly having that pull tighter on the neck until eventually they're like, yep, it falls apart. And so really impressive from Weibo to not only win this matchup against a top team, but to break V5's unbeaten record for the split so far. They've looked really, really good, but that's exciting to see another team that is in that kind of middle of the pack mix look so strong. It didn't seem like it was a one-off kind of thing. It seemed like it was a pretty well planned and executed matchup, and so I'm interested to see how Weibo does moving forward. They're in seventh right now at a 6-4 record, but taking that match off of V5 definitely puts them in kind of the wings of what I'm keeping an eye on for the LPL.
Yeah, big time. I mean, I think it was last year, or the year before. I know we were talking about Huan Fang as a rookie AD carry coming in, or at least just like in one of his first two seasons. So yeah, it's exciting to see some of these players grow and really like start taking games off of top teams. And just the series overall was like really fun and exciting to watch. The pick and ban interplay with the Jax and the Viego, like obviously that had to be. So then, like, what's the answer? So just a lot of fun stuff from a series perspective overall, coming from the LPL.
Yeah, so and it's exciting because they do have such a large group of teams. They have 10 teams that go to playoffs out of the 17, and for Weibo to be in there taking games off of V5, who is 9-1 now with just top esports and JD Gaming ahead of them in the standings at 10-1. That's exciting. It's going to be interesting to just see how things shake out because we do still have some good teams that are just outside of that playoff position with FPX, Billy Gaming being in 11th and 12th just outside. So there's still plenty of good matchups to be had going into the upcoming weeks of the LPL. But it was really an awesome series from Weibo to pick up that victory.
Yeah, it's not often you see an upset of that caliber, and so yeah, it was an exciting one to catch. I'm looking forward to keeping an eye on both of those teams. But coming up next week, we'll pick some different teams, some different matchups, and see where these leagues go from here. But until then, we just have a little bit of magic here. Just wanna sprinkle it in. I basically just want to make sure I'm doing right by my buddy. Death Magic, forever giving me the invites, always in the Discord looking for games and setting things up for his YouTube channel. So I have to shout out Veil of Death MTG. Check him out. The cEDH content is really good. And you can see me winning games.
Yeah. So
Um,
what were you winning on with these games this past week? How many games did you play? What were you playing?
We played three games, as per usual. Magic sessions tend to like rock in threes. You know, you get three games in. I played Burgie in all three of them. She's really the only deck that like can hang at those tables. So that's what I bring. That's what I pilot. I went 1-2 on the day. Was pretty close in like each of the games though. Never out of it. What I do want to talk about in game two, which I won, was a different kind of victory where I had a little bit of a graveyard loop set up. However, being that I was drawing each player 7 cards with my little loop to try and get to the things that I needed, we couldn't call it just a deterministic victory because I would have been wheeling the other players into counter magic or ways to like say no. So each time I cast this Wheel of Fortune, I had to like basically wait and look at the blue players and be like, did you get, your counter magic? All right, no, keep going. So I had to do the Wheel of Fortune a couple times to loop to get what I needed. And there was a point where then Death Magic was like, all right, so you only have 2 mana open right now. And I was like, oh no, here it is. I'm going to get stopped. He had the Force of Negation. We got to exile the spell. But thankfully, part of the hand that I had drawn into gave me the mana to be able to finish out the loop and end up killing the table and win the game. But the two comments from here are it's the Wheel of Fortune, Jessica's Will, Underworld Breach that sets up the little draw a bunch of mana or draw a bunch of cards, give you mana to play those cards, draw a bunch of cards, give you mana to play those cards. It was the first time I'd gotten into that loop, which is really fun.
Nice.
But B, it was sweet to have like the interaction and the for the deck to have the resilience to fight through a bunch of counter spells, fight through attempts to stop my victory and still like come out with the win on top. That is, I think, one of the hallmarks of a strong cEDH deck is being able to like fight through people stopping you.
And so is that Burgie deck your full Burgie deck, or is it a like one with proxies that you've added in, or is it just straight cards that you own?
It's proxies included, as
Okay.
well as some. Yeah, I guess they're all proxies. Some
Okay,
some just
but
have different arts than like the original art.
it is a like it's Burgie is a deck that you play in the Commander 9, so I know that you have a Burgie deck.
I haven't.
Oh,
I
okay.
played it. I likely only played it one time with that group, and
Gotcha.
then once me and Death Magic met, I played on the Mental Misplay.
Yeah.
So I
Okay, so
had made Burgie cEDH. I don't make Ian and Brett and them deal with that. I just play this like online.
gotcha. Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. So I just say all of that to say really fun times on Saturday. I always appreciate the invite, always appreciate being able to jam some games. And it's just fun to win, my friend.
Oh, absolutely. It's always a good feeling.
Hell yeah. But yeah, so those are my Magic games. Let's get these people out of here. Give me your flavor of the week here, sir.
Sounds good. So this past week, Colleen and I, we ended up going to hang out with one of her friends who lives back in South Philly for a little bit. But on the way to meet up with him, we grabbed dinner at the Hefe Tacos, the place tacos
Ooh.
that don't suck. They did not suck. They were really good. I had a really solid shrimp taco that had like this spicy coleslaw on top with pomegranate in it and everything.
Ooh.
Really, really good. And then the kimchi tacos that I had the last time. So really, really solid. Lately for my music, getting into that, I've been in a little more of a like mellow vibe, but not like poppy mellow really. So I've been listening to some of the different playlists on the Made for You stuff on Spotify, and was listening recently to the one that has some songs by the Kooks on it, which I really enjoy. And also, shout out to you. But Jackson Brown also came up in that same playlist. I know that's one of your recommendations from a while ago when we were talking about some of our top musicians
Yep.
going through that list. So,
Hell yeah.
good recommendation that I've like mixed in here and there and ended up coming up in that Spotify playlist. So it was pretty cool.
Nice.
And enjoyed that a lot. And then for my visual medium, I've been took a brief break from Naruto. Sorry, Willie. Sorry, Zach. And I've got back into My Hero Academia a bit for my anime fix. I've been, now that the more recent episodes have gotten the dub version, because I'm a scum anime watcher who
Filthy casual.
only watches dub because I don't feel like reading when I'm watching my TV. I've been watching those episodes from the past season, so it's been fun getting back into that and kind of
Very cool.
catching up. But that is my flavor of the week.
Nice. Mine is a little less exciting. My music here for the week is just, I'll categorize it as just nostalgic video game music. We found the, improved Crash trilogy on Steam, as well as the improved Spyro trilogy.
I've
So
never played them.
really,
I've
that's
never,
surprising, actually.
I have never, and I never had a PS1 or a
Ah,
PS2, so I never played either. But I remember vividly as a kid just seeing the cool ass Spyro and Crash Bandicoot commercials on TV and being like, oh, I would love to play that. Never
dude,
have played
they're
them.
great games, great like little platformer games, and obviously the soundtrack is sticky and memorable. Like once we hit some of those levels and some of those islands, I was like, oh my God, this is like, blast from the past.
That's cool.
So that was really fun. My food for the week, Sarah made up a chicken veggie soup that just had like zooks and tomatoes and corn and just like all sorts of gumbo. So that was amazing. She like hooks the soups up every time. So that one's great. And then my visual medium here for the week, an old Western favorite, Kurt Russell special, Tombstone. Have you ever seen it, my friend?
I've not.
Oh my God. It was just classic cinema, hoot and a holler. It was so much fun. I'd never seen it before, but yeah, it was a great time. There's a scene in one of the saloons. If you're gonna watch it, I'm not gonna ruin it, but I will just say skin that smoke wagon, boy. It is a hoot. That movie is amazing.
Okay.
But
What
that is
did you
my
watch it on? I'm gonna have to add it to my list.
I think it was on Netflix or Hulu. It was one of those.
Okay.
It might actually have been Hulu. But yeah, check that out if you like the old Western flavor. It's so good. But yeah, that's my flavor of the week here.
Very cool. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, it does bring us to the end of this week's episode. Of course, you can always find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify. Check us out on YouTube. We've got our race companion from the Austrian Grand Prix. We've got the video episodes. And of course, hit us up on Twitter. I saw Death Magic liking some of the tweets with you guys being playing some games and everything. So that's awesome to see. Any interaction, let us know your flavor of the week. We'd love to hear it. But thank you all for listening with us.
Yeah, at tall and short of one on Twitter. That's where I post like any updates for like scheduling changes or anything. I know we took the week off. You can find out all of that information on our Twitter, at tall and short of one. All of our social medias on the link tree below. Just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you each and every week. Thank you so much. But yeah, this has been another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast. Peace out, everybody.
Later.